Since my last story about Rob's experiments struck a chord, here's another I've heard that keeps me up at night. As always, it's thanks to Steve's circle of contacts that I even know of this story. As noble as science aims to be, the very people driving it are all too human, with all our faults and frailties. In pushing the boundaries of our knowledge, we sometimes open very dark and gruesome doors that are best left shut. We perform the unspeakable on each other, absolving our sins by justifying it for some greater good. It's how Japan's infamous Unit 731 or Joseph Mengele were allowed to commit the atrocities they did during World War II that history has so condemned. In the world of psychology, the work of Harry Harlow would be placed in the same company. Harlow was a pioneering researcher on social deprivation and sought to understand the nature of love and depression. His methods were, however, unethical at best. For example, his experiments from the 70s, like the Pit of Despair, is, to put it mildly, some seriously fucked up shit. He had monkeys hung upside down in the dark for months on end, deprived of all social contact or stimulus, just to see how insane they would become. The female monkeys that had become too unsocial to mate, he had tied to what he called rape racks and artificially inseminated them. He would give the resulting young to these unwilling mothers to test their parenting skills. One held her baby's face to the floor, chewed off his feet and fingers, and another crushed her baby's head. But as infamous as Harlow's work was, this story is not about him. It's about another researcher, far less known and much more private, who was fascinated by Harlow's experiments and following in his footsteps with his own take. Known only as Harlow's apprentice to those who knew of him, he had been pushing the ethical boundaries in his pursuit and hunger for the unknown. On this world exist several places that, for all intents and purposes, seem like ordinary rooms. Known as anechoic chambers, the only strangeness is that the interiors are completely covered with sound-absorbent material, removing even the loudest echoes or external noises from the room. Normally used for recording music or testing sensitive equipment, these chambers are so quiet that their ambient noise levels are often measured in negative decibels. For comparison, an ordinary quiet room is 30 decibels. Some are also built underground, further reducing any interference from the outside, such as light, temperature, and climate. Which was exactly what Harlow's apprentice wanted, and had access to. Funded by a private and wealthy benefactor, his research was to explore the human mind in its purest form, free from all physical stimulation and senses. He reasoned that such a mind, free from all distractions, would give us a greater understanding of ourselves than we ever thought possible. It is a state of nirvana that so many followers of Eastern religions have sought to attain for centuries. He had often joked that his ideal experiment was to find a volunteer, break their spinal cord at the neck to sever their optical and oral nerves, and to cut their tongue until all that was left was a functioning brain. The only problem was his volunteers wouldn't then be able to provide the feedback he needed. So an underground, soundproofed, and climate-controlled room was the next best thing, and much more practical. Ironically, thanks to the backlash from Harlow's experiments in the 70s, testing on animals is strictly regulated, but non-medical experiments on humans are much less so, especially when there are plenty of homeless, destitute, and desperate folks who welcome some quick cash, a warm meal, and cleanup. The tests were straightforward enough. After being fed, washed, and provided with some light clothing, the experiments required the subjects to be comfortable. The volunteers were briefed on their task. Inside the chamber, a 50 by 50 foot room, covered from floor to ceiling with a black foam-like material, would be a single padded chair. The participant would be strapped in to avoid contaminating the tests by volunteers touching or hurting themselves, and fitted with various biosensors. During the experiment, the lights and humidity levels would be lowered, effectively dulling all the senses as they sat alone. Attached to their clothing would be a lapel mic, so they could speak out about what they were experiencing, while their vital signs were monitored. As there were no speakers in the room to avoid any sounds interfering with the sensory deprivation, there would be absolutely no contact with the test controllers once the experiment started, until it ended. At any time during the experiment, they could end it by asking for it to stop. The longer they lasted into the experiment, the more they got paid. However, once stopped by the participants or the researchers, for example due to signal loss on the biosensors, the experiment would be considered contaminated. The lights would be immediately restored, and a single door opened for the researcher to come in. Even so, no one has ever lasted more than 53 minutes. Typically, the first few minutes strapped inside the chamber were always in adaptation phase. The participants would find the room slightly disorienting, without really knowing why. It's because there's not even the slightest echo, which we're normally subconsciously tuned into. Even their sense of balance is slightly off. Giggling and laughing would often follow as they start testing the acoustics of their strange environment, yelling and shouting, or in one instance even yodeling, only to find the walls absorbing everything. At the 10-minute mark, what was left of the dim lights would rapidly die away, totally depriving them of sight. After 15 minutes, the already dry humidity levels have fallen significantly further, greatly dulling their senses of smell, taste, and temperature. Many participants would describe this point as feeling like what they imagined floating in space would be like. Or being dead. At around 20 minutes, most subjects have started running out of things to say, and loneliness begins to set in. Most make a comment that they aren't even sure if anyone's listening to them anymore. Their eyes have adapted to the dark, but due to the black interior room lighting and complete absence of any light sources, they see shadows and shadows at best. 28% of participants have dropped out by this point, many with panic attacks. Around 11% are going stir-crazy, experiencing highly elevated vital signs and madly shouting expletives. However, the test is not stopped in these instances unless they specifically ask for it to be. The remainder absorb the isolation and sit in silence, trying to make sense of the situation. By the 25-minute mark, 81% of participants have been quiet enough to notice that their internal body sounds are now greatly amplified, as their minds are straining for even the slightest input they can get. Every breath they take sounds like a thundering train passing by. Every swallow of their throat is an explosion going off in their brain. Every heartbeat is the dull thudding of a jackhammer in slow motion. By the time 30 minutes have passed, most have experienced some form of sensory hallucination. This tends to vary from person to person. Some report seeing patterns of lights dancing all around them, and others reported the smell of decaying flowers or feeling shivers all over their skin. This often triggers a sensory cascade, bringing back memories from their childhood. The whip of a cane, the death of a parent, the bread from the kitchen, the time they almost drowned. For many of the participants who have spent much of their life running from or suppressing their past, these were often traumatic and highly undesirable. 41% of participants have dropped out by this stage. At the 34-minute mark, a quarter of those remaining volunteers report hearing Morse code, faintly at first, but growing louder against the noises from their own body. All of them report 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots, and then a stream of gibberish. After a few moments, the pattern seems to repeat. After 37 minutes, all the hallucinations start to converge on the same themes, regardless of the participant or their backgrounds. They all report the room getting noticeably warmer, though no adjustments have been made to climate levels, and indistinct voices calling to them are heard. Some have identified these as coming from their long-lost people from their past. At 39 minutes, young children are heard laughing with an unusually high pitch. It's never perceived as being threatening, but All participants have described it as seeming sinister or unnatural. Most are now speaking random gibberish in between sentences to ward off the silence. Their vital signs are starting to show strong signs of anxiety. More than half of the volunteers, 58%, have dropped off by this point. By the time 43 minutes have passed, the laughing has morphed into a chanting from a dozen different voices. It's never in a language the participant speaks and has been described as ranging from Tibetan monks to Gregorian chants or even hornets and bees singing with snakes. Only 27% of participants make it this far. At the 46th minute, everything suddenly stops. The participants hold their breath, and between their booming heartbeats are moments of pure silence, until a deep voice whispers, always into their left ear for some unknown reason. He is coming. He is coming. Prepare. Just 13% of participants make it beyond here. At the 47th minute, those that have lasted this long have greatly elevated heart rates, often approaching 200 beats per minute. Punctuating every dozenth beat is a deep vibration, like a heavy footstep slowly approaching from behind. Their chests are pounding like their souls want to burst free from whatever is getting closer. 93% of test subjects have yelled stop by this point, begging and crying to be released. At the 48th minute, children's voices are heard again, screaming and panicking. Run! Run! Go before he arrives!
Run before he arrives.
The few remaining participants that have made it this far report a dramatic temperature drop, their teeth chattering and whole body shivering. At 49 minutes, a voice describes in detail how they will die, slowly and painfully, their skin torn from their flesh after 1,000 incisions are made to prolong their torment. Less than 3% of participants have bravely, and perhaps foolishly, gone past this point. At the 50th minute, the booming vibrations growing ever louder from behind suddenly stop. There's complete silence for a minute. Even their furiously galloping heartbeat and ragged hyperventilating breaths seem muted. For another minute, there's deathly silence. A heavy, moist breath is felt down their neck, and a strong smell, like a mixture of chlorine and rotten eggs, fills their nostrils. A couple of participants reported feeling a warm, long tongue licking at the back of their neck. Only 4 participants endured beyond this point. At the 52-minute mark, laceration marks start appearing on their arms and shoulders as participants scream to be let out. Deep lacerations on the neck have also been found, requiring hospitalization. Only 2 volunteers have lasted beyond this point. At 53 minutes, only 2 participants, for whatever reason, never called for the experiment to stop. Neither survived. No one has ever lasted more than 53 minutes. If you made it this far, I hope you'll follow me on Twitter at KingSpookCreepy. Also, if you're feeling generous, I'd appreciate it if you donate even $1 to my Patreon over at patreon.com/KingSpook. Every dollar helps. The hope is eventually I'll be able to get enough through Patreon that I can do this full time. Thanks for watching. For the $50 tier, I want to thank William Logston, For the $20 tier, I want to thank Christian Nolan, Lecter, City of Dis, Cherry Fairstein, Jules Latona, Corey Yoder, Nathan G. Grainer, Oblong Doucheboy, Wicked Star. And for the $5 tier, I'd like to thank Nico E., Deborah Alexander, Charles Anderson, April Rose, Amy Simon, Patrick Kelly, Gage Garza, Alkaline, Mysail Cruz, David Harner, Lauren Swiatko, Myelin, Dragonfly, Cordo Rudent, Shion, The Plague. And for people who chose not to pick any specific reward, I want to thank Celeste Schmidt, Alex P., Alexander Rodriguez, Jennifer, Heather Snodgrass, Minister Elena C. Henderson, Caleb Doinkies, Matthew Bergman, Daniel Smakala, Sandra Credo, and Dustin May. Thank you guys for helping to support me, and I greatly appreciate it.